Hey everyone, this is Pastor Alec here again, and I'm joined by Eli today. How's it going, Eli?
Oh, pretty good.
All right, cool. Well, today we were going to do something a little different, and we were going to talk about Holy Week because that's what time of year it is now. We're finishing up Lent. Palm Sunday is over, and we're heading into Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday, and then Easter Sunday. So, what you got? Thoughts, questions?
First one I'm learning about is art appreciation in school, and I saw The Last Supper.
Okay.
It just so happened to be this week too.
Okay. By Da Vinci?
Yeah.
Okay, Last Supper.
So in that, Judas was holding his bag of silver that he got. Did
Okay.
he betray Jesus before that night, or was that after?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because it's kind of happening as the Last Supper is happening.
Right.
So it's interesting, if you read the Gospel of Luke, Satan actually comes into Judas before the Last Supper.
Okay.
And he's already been talking with the chief priests, and so he's made the deal, and Satan is actually inside of him at the Last Supper.
Okay.
And then Jesus does the words of institution and all that.
Right.
And he says, one of you is going to betray me, and go do what you're gonna do. And so then Judas leaves after they all have this big questioning of who's he talking about, right?
Right.
And Judas leaves, and then the next time they see Judas, he's got now the guard. They're
Right.
ready to arrest Jesus.
Okay.
So the whole thing, his whole plan is already in process.
Yeah. That
By
makes
the Last
sense.
Supper. Yeah.
I know I could have looked that up, but I just wanted to ask you that.
Yeah. Well, you should. I would encourage you to go back to read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and see the different details that each one includes about the betrayal.
Yeah, well, I was reading it was Matthew and John and how they were talking about the trial that Jesus had.
Yeah.
And those were kind of cool, how they were like differed a little bit, but they were basically the same.
Yeah, they're basically the same.
Just kind of like translation, I guess.
Yeah, well, no, I mean they're saying different things.
Yeah.
They're definitely saying different things, and this is one of my favorite. Since you bring up the trial itself, this is one of my favorite. This is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, and this is, I guess we'll start with verse 59. This is where Peter is watching the trial of Jesus, at least the part that's taking place in the courtyard of the high priest. And he's not that far away. And the courtyard is right there. They can see what's happening, right? So this is verse let's say 57. I said 59 before. It's 57. So 22:57. They say, okay, they accuse him of being with Jesus. And he says, but he denied it, saying, woman, I do not know him. And a little later, someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. But Peter said, man, I am not. And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, certainly this man also was with him. For he too is a Galilean. Right? They can tell he's Galilean.
Right.
It's the way he talks and maybe the way he dresses. He looks a little different than someone in Jerusalem. But Peter said, man, I do not know what you are talking about. Now, it's the third time that he denies him.
Right.
Right? And that's a big thing in all the Gospels. You see that.
Yeah.
And it says, and immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, which is what Jesus predicted would happen.
Yeah.
And then, and this is in the Gospel of Luke, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. So as Jesus is going through this trial,
Right.
and as there's all these, they're going to bring in false witnesses, all kinds of things are going to happen. He's going to be accused of all kinds of different things. Peter he's not that far away.
Right.
And they're asking Peter, aren't you one of his friends or his disciples? Aren't you with him? And he
Yeah.
says, no, no, no. Of course, Jesus has just told him, you're going to deny me not that long ago, a few hours ago. And Peter said, oh, the Lord will never deny
Right.
you. And he says, well, no, before the rooster crows. and this is one thing that's different in the different Gospels. Before the rooster crows twice, right?
Right.
And right when it happens, he denies him the third time, and the rooster crows, and Jesus, who is on trial for his life, turns back and looks out the window at Peter.
That.
And they
That would
connect
be-
eyes,
Right.
and Peter's going,
that would just feel terrible.
and he goes outside, and that is such an overlooked scene.
Right.
We never talk about that.
Yeah.
That it happens, and Jesus kind of just looks back at him.
That was
like,
that was one of my points I was going to talk about. It's
Okay.
like when you're doing something and you're not, or it's going bad, or you're ruining it, and you
Yeah.
keep ruining it. It's
Yeah.
like the same feeling.
Yeah. Except like worse than anything that
Yeah.
we might
Oh yeah.
feel like we're experiencing. But yeah, that is.
Yeah.
I think that's such an important scene that we just gloss over. Jesus looks back at him
Right.
like, I know. I told you. I know it's going to happen. Peter, just
Yeah. Well, now,
Yeah.
and was Peter, when Jesus resurrected Peter, was the one that had to feel the holes in his hand?
no that well they
That was Tom.
well that's in the Gospel of John, and they all do. They
Okay.
all do. But Thomas, and this is, you can flip to John chapter 20. You see the last bits. John's resurrection accounts are in John chapter 20 and 21, and they all do, but something I tell people when I'm teaching the Gospel of John or preaching on it is that John has this way that's so different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke about the way that he speaks cosmologically.
Yeah.
He can speak, in the beginning was the Word.
Right.
And then Jesus on the cross, and John is the one who says, in the end when it all had finished,
Right.
or when the end had happened, it's the word tetelestai, which is just the word telos, end,
Yeah.
in John, or just the word in Greek, the word in telos, and it's just the verbal form of it.
Okay.
So John says it as he's talking about what's happening, and then Jesus on the cross, his last word is tetelestai. And we always translate it as it is finished. It could also just be translated as the end has taken place.
Okay, yeah.
And so in the Gospel of John, you get this really neat, and this is also repeated in John chapter 13 when he begins his Last Supper account. John is talking about Jesus. He loved his own who were in the world, and he loved them to the end, eis telos.
Okay.
And so Jesus is presented as the one through whom everything is created, and the one who's the source of life, and then he dies.
Right.
And he is the beginning and the end of all things.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you see in Revelation, which is also written by John, Jesus refers to himself as the arche, the beginning,
Right.
and the telos, the beginning. I am the beginning and the end. And John is so cool like that. And so John is his way. He can speak. And so when Jesus is saying the end has happened, it's like the life source of all of creation has now died.
Right.
And so what does that mean for you then? If Jesus is your beginning, he's also your end. And so there's a word we use, it's called, the word is proleptic, which means it's already kind of taken place. A future event has already taken place now.
Okay.
So this
Yeah.
creation, in some sense, is kind of like a dead man walking.
Right.
Because the one through whom it's created has died.
Right.
The end has happened. It is finished, right? And that means the sinful nature of it all has also passed away, right? So your sins are forgiven.
Yeah.
That's died too. And then John has a garden scene for the resurrection, and there's a new start. There's a new beginning.
Right.
So in 20 and 21, then your question, going back to your question about Thomas, is that Thomas is also named Didymus. It means the twin.
Yeah.
So some people think that maybe Thomas actually looked a lot like Jesus.
Okay.
And by the time John is written, that there might be, I don't know, there's rumors, conspiracies, there's all kinds of things swirling around about what had happened. And the Gospels address that about word being spread that the disciples took his body and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And So, so you might have some people saying, well, it wasn't really Jesus that died, it was Thomas. Or we're not really seeing the resurrected Jesus, we're seeing Thomas.
Yeah.
And so what John does is he puts all the disciples in the room with Jesus except for Thomas. And they all touch his wounds, they all ask, and they touch his
Right.
wounds. And then in the next scene, Thomas is there and says, unless I touch his wounds too. And so now John makes this big point of now showing that Jesus and Thomas are both in the same room
Right.
together.
I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so we always kind of throw Thomas under the bus. Doubting Thomas
Right.
is nothing to do with that.
They
This
all-
is
they were
not
all
they
doubting.
all yeah, they all touched his sides. And Thomas is just asking to get what the other disciples did.
Right.
And so the whole point is that he puts Thomas and Jesus in the same room, very, on purpose.
Right.
But then he says, so by the way, so you got to think, a lot of people that are reading the Gospel of John is written like 90, 95 AD.
Yeah.
A lot of the disciples are dead except for John, right? And I mean, the first generation of Christians they've come and gone in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so John is one of his points in all of this is, look, you're not going to have the privilege of the disciples, including Thomas.
Right.
You're probably not going to see the resurrected Christ. Yeah. And so right after that event, he says, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So you're not going to get to touch his sides, but you now have this so that you can believe.
Right.
And that's why he kind of breaks the fourth wall. So Thomas, it's really, the whole doubting Thomas thing is really unfair, and I think a very kind of a misreading of the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
So what else you got? I know I kind of went all over the place
no,
there.
You're fine. I think I had something. I really thought the trial, you were talking about how John has a way with words.
Yeah.
And I really thought the trial with Pontius Pilate was interesting, really interesting.
Okay. So the trial specifically in John then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was described in Matthew was what I was reading as well.
Okay.
But the one with Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
That was like an actual Roman court trial.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and Pilate, he was actually there. It was not a good place. I mean, Judea was known as a place with people that they revolt against. They against Romanization. They revolted before against Hellenization by the Greeks. Okay, and Pilate was actually there because it was a punishment for him to be there. And he didn't hang out in Jerusalem. He would hang out on the coast in the city of Caesarea Philippi.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, the coastal city, where
Right.
it's nicer, more Roman. And then he would come into Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festival.
Yeah.
And have to deal with stuff like this, right? Or insurrectionists like Barabbas or whatever.
Right.
And he didn't want to be there either.
Well, so I was going to ask, I know it doesn't say much in the scripture, or I may have missed it. Was he a good guy, or like compared to, like, say, Herod or something?
No, their families actually did not like each other.
Okay.
Herod and Pilate's families did
Yeah.
not like each other. But in the Gospel of Luke, actually through the trial, where Luke sets up Jesus as, Caesar Augustus is showing his power over the newly minted Roman Empire.
Right.
Caesar Augustus, Octavian, was the first emperor of Rome.
Yeah.
And he has a census to kind of show his authority, and Jesus is born in the midst of all of that. And you see the play, if we were to get into kind of Luke Acts, and the way that Luke in both of those books kind of juxtaposes the kingdom of God in Jesus, or the kingdom of heaven in Jesus, and the Roman Empire. There's a lot to say about that, which we're not going to go into right now. But
Right.
But as a part of Luke's gospel, when Jesus is being passed back and forth between Herod and Pilate, it makes it very clear that they didn't like each other.
Yeah.
But during the trial of Jesus, they became friends.
That's kind of cool.
So it's kind of like the world goes against Jesus.
Right.
All the political structures are against Jesus.
Yeah.
And you see that even today. And so I mean, he's a Roman. Is he a good guy? we probably wouldn't say so.
Right.
No, I don't think there's reason to think that. He washes his hands of the whole thing, though. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He's definitely not painted as. I wouldn't say he's painted as a villain in the text,
Right.
or something. He makes it very clear he doesn't really want any part in it.
Yeah,
but
and
it doesn't mean he's a good guy.
Because they just made it like kind of like he didn't want to do it, what he did.
Yeah. He probably is looking at him saying, "Look, I don't care. Why
Right.
why are we going to put this in it? He seems to be innocent enough.
Right.
Well, he even says, we'll beat him and send him away."
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's not a good guy.
Right.
But yeah, we'll flog him a little bit, beat him up, bust his kneecaps out back or something, and then send him away.
Right.
And that should be good enough. And that to them, that's not good enough. And so, and even remember that his wife has a dream, and she
Yeah,
warns him
I do
about
remember.
this whole thing. And so yeah, I mean, he's a
Caught in the
Roman
middle,
governor just trying to do his job, I guess.
Right.
But he definitely is not portrayed as like a Christian or something,
right.
he's not portrayed as a believer in Jesus. Now, that being said, there are different traditions that have tried to paint him in that light over the
Okay.
years.
Yeah.
But nah, he's just a Roman governor who doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's about all.
Okay.
All that I had. Answered all my questions.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, with Holy Week and there's a lot to talk about, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, we can stop it there, and next time we will pick back up again with Genesis.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you
Alrighty,
for your
yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for joining us.